Hey, Jeni.
Hey, Nikki.
Hey, disruptors. Disrupt. To disturb, rattle, agitate, confuse, disorder. To destroy the normal continuance or unity of. To disrupt a connection.
On this show, we harness the power of disruption to propel positive change and personal fulfillment. Get ready to reimagine the future as we disrupt the status quo for good. The opinions expressed on this podcast are our own, based on our own personal experiences. We encourage you to think critically and find your own path. The information provided is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. I mean, come on.
We are here to disrupt. Hey, Jeni.
Hey, Nikki. We're back.
We're back. Here to disrupt. We're always disrupting shit. Story of our lives.
You know, that is part of it. Like, I actually think that you and I, and others, I know, feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like, some of us are born and we just literally can't help it.
No.
I always say that I'm a nice person because I know this about myself. I just know because the people who I'm around reflect that back.
Yeah.
But just not manageable. So, you know, it's not, it's like really not, it's like, we really can't. It's
we
just
can't
not,
help
we're not going to be
it.
able to help it.
So today, we're talking about food.
Yeah, we're going to start it out. We're just going to kick it off.
Start it off. We're going to kick it off.
We're going to go to a familiar place.
Familiar places. I mean, you and I both have affinity and a love for all things food. Sweet,
flavor,
savory, flavors, textures,
finish, body, all the sexy stuff.
All the things, our food memories. I think that is where we should start with, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great. It's a kind of a grounding way for us to begin this journey, this podcast world or whatever. And I think I also just want to say that, I mean, I know we think this way, but that this is kind of a community. Like, we're inviting everybody to be a part of this. Yeah. And to kind of feel that this is something of a home in a way, that this space that we're creating is a little bit of a shelter or something.
It is. I mean, it's a safe space.
Yeah.
You know, for it's a safe space for all things that we're about. You know what I mean?
Questions.
Outside of being, you know, just multifaceted people, we still really like to have the dialogue to get to the hard stuff or to work towards the understanding. So
yeah, and just like welcoming everybody who's listening, you know, just with a big hug and open arms. Yeah. So today,
here we are
talking about food.
So
and memories.
We're talking about when we first fell in love with food, or like, you got to eat. So we know we got to eat, you know, but
you're born loving food.
You're born loving food, but
you know, the first time, like when I had, speaking of like the very beginning, the very, very beginning, you know, you have babies and you're breastfeeding them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what does that taste like? I mean, it's kind of gross, but like, what does that taste like?
Yeah.
And I tasted it.
Yeah.
And you want to know what breast milk tastes like?
I know what it tastes
like. It fucking tastes like ice cream.
It does. Sweet.
It tastes like melted ice cream.
It's sweet, yes.
It is actually such a beautiful way to enter the world of food.
It is. I mean, if you're coming in on a sweet note, I mean, you're the sweet girl. So like, you definitely understand that. If you're coming in on that note, like your first drink, it's like the land of milk and honey.
Exactly. It literally is life sustaining. It's that milk and honey. Yeah. Which is literally what ice cream is.
It is.
Especially Jenny's, you know, we were using the milk and honey. We're using so much of this honey, this beautiful honey that we've used forever and ever. Yeah. But yeah, so beyond the fact that, yes, we need food to, you know, we are introduced to food in the very beginning, and actually really quite beautiful. Uh-huh. But yeah, what is your first, like, do you have like a first, like, where you were just like, oh, fuck, that's good? About food?
I do actually. I mean, I do have some very early food memories that made me think like I like food more than the average person. You know what I mean? Like, because I was always very particular about, like, I wasn't like a particular, like, how my food was placed on the plate, but I was very particular on the flavors or lack thereof. I do remember some of my earliest memories of telling my mother that this doesn't taste right, or this doesn't taste like the last time you made it, or things like that. You know, just noticing the difference in either the technique
because she's
or
probably
the
making it
delivery.
based on memory. So she's making her stuff
And she's
And
also
normally
making
it
stuff
probably
just to
tastes exactly the
feed.
same. But yeah,
Like,
yeah,
just
exactly.
to feed me. And she's not
And you were like,
making...
wait, there's something here. Because,
Yeah.
you know, the thing is, do you have this too? Like when you were, and even when you were a kid in this moment, but like, you know it's right because there's a feeling associated with it.
Yeah.
So even a flavor or a dish that you've made 100 times, like you know it's right because it feels right.
Yeah.
Because when you taste it, you hit the feeling. But it's true too, like when you go to a restaurant or you go have our ice cream or whatever, like if it's off that day or if it's not right, it's really more of a feeling. Like it's like it's just you. And then when it's right, it feels like it's right. It's
Yeah.
like it clicks.
And it clicks. And it kind of also like, it rubs you in a certain way where you're like, okay.
Yes, it hits.
I like that. I think not that I think I know. Going from like my mom's house to my grandmother's house on food experiences, when I was mentioning like my mom would make food just to make sure I ate. You know,
Yes.
like my need was met.
And she was working.
And she was
too,
working.
And had
My
a lot
mother
of
was
stuff
a
to
single
do.
parent. Like she was working. And then I go to my grandmother's house. I'm like, wow, something about this experience is way different because you could actually taste the time that was put into that or the layers that was put into the food. And also, not saying my mom didn't care. She just had shit to do. You know what I'm saying? It was and my grandmother was more or less taking her time and developing those flavors. And I think...
So, like, what kinds of things were you eating? Like, tell me what you ate at your mom's house that you loved, or even that you didn't love that you were making all the time.
My mom was crock pot queen.
Yeah. Okay. Mine too.
She
yeah.
loved the crock pot.
That was the era.
Crock pot. In that era,
Which I actually still like the crock pot. To be honest.
I still fuck with the crock pot. I put like a roast in the crock pot or like some
It's a
sort
brilliant
of
idea. Honestly.
anything, turkey breast or a roast, and she throws some vegetables in there, you know, onions, garlic, things like that, and just set it and forget it and go to work. And then I would come home from school and she would tell me to like turn the crock pot on low or like off so it could just sit and the flavors would melt. So those early memories of that were great for me. My mother was also a casserole person.
Yep. Same.
And so like
that tuna casserole. I mean, for me,
tuna fucking casserole.
That's a memory. That's core. This is like mom food.
Yeah.
From the 80s or core. But and it was always like tuna helper or something. There was one that was specific.
It was very specific.
They don't make it anymore
tuna
either.
And the noodles.
Yeah.
And then then you have variations of what you're adding in there.
Did you
could
have
add
peas?
Mayo and peas.
Mayo, I don't know about that.
Yeah, like I remember like just to keep the creaminess because my mother would like put cheese in there.
Yeah, mine too. Yes.
So, but it would be cheese, carrots, peas, maybe a little bit of onion, tuna. But the mayo for the creaminess.
Was there like a mushroom soup in there?
Every now and then you could put a cream of mushroom soup in
That's
there.
what we did, I think. Which I mean, that Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. You throw that in.
That shit was legendary.
I mean, seriously.
I
don't use that anymore in my cooking, but there is like a pork chop,
cream of chicken and cream
that
of
like
mushroom.
I remember, and that was like something.
Yeah.
Okay, but on the tuna casserole because this is potato chips on top.
Ooh, no, I think that was definitely a white thing.
Okay, well, that was what we did. That was a very good white thing. No, I have to say.
It was definitely a Midwestern white thing. Nah, we didn't do potato chips. I didn't even get introduced to breadcrumbs on like casseroles until I went to my white friend's house for real. And like chips and crunchy things. It would never happen. Like I didn't even eat green bean casserole. My family never made it. But it is a very Midwestern thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, it was just the potato chips. And I was like, I like it. Okay. My mom was like, well, who would do that?
This is that like atomic food though of that era of the probably 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s that like,
it was,
you're just mixing stuff from the middle of the grocery store.
Yeah.
And what happened, I think was that, it was brilliant. These companies were engaging women to come to these contests to win, and then if you won the contest, like it became like a big recipe. These women were challenged with.
They were entering in all these recipe contests. I remember when Campbell's would do that. I remember all these.
Like you have to use Campbell soup and all the Campbell's other brands or whatever, and then like sometimes these recipes would really take off.
We'll do that. Now I have not eaten tuna casserole probably since I was a teenager. I have not made it as an adult. Maybe I'm triggered.
But I
don't know.
can taste it. But I wouldn't make it probably. Yeah. No. I wouldn't even.
I would think that like the main things that like tuna casserole, chili was a big thing. My mom would jazz it up and then make chili mac and then throw macaroni noodles in there.
Same and not that's the same. That was or shells. I love when you get like a shell and you get like the bean and shelf. Okay,
I do
that's a
like
memory.
that.
That's a memory.
Yeah. I mean, I do like that, and a lot of cheese. I grew up in Cincinnati, so
Oh yeah.
growing up in Cincinnati, like chili was like it was like chili wars, like depending on what side of town, and then you had your big
Oh yeah.
like Skyline chili and Gold Star chili, so that was an argument. But chili was a very early memory.
Cornbread. I mean, for us, my family is a not sweet cornbread family.
My family is a sweet cornbread family.
But I love sweet. See, that's me though. I mean, of course I do. So I was always putting honey and butter. We always had our own honey because we had honeybees.
Yeah.
And of course in the Midwest, like we never use olive oil. Like what the hell? That's not ever gonna.
So
it's all butter,
like butter
or margarine,
vegetable oil or margarine.
Yeah, margarine too.
Yeah.
A lot of margarine.
A country
that was
crock
happening.
margarine. Are we talking about? I can't believe it's butter margarine. Are we talking about?
We're
Blue
talking about like Land
Bonnet,
O'Lakes margarine,
okay,
or probably even like some country crock.
Yeah, the country crock tubs were like the things that you reuse.
Yeah. Then you would use them to
put
like
your leftovers.
Exactly.
In the country
You
crock
wash them.
tubs.
But the cornbread, because like chili, that was always like our thing. It was cornbread, and then you would like put the cornbread in the chili, but it was always like not sweet.
Yeah.
And so I always liked
We
cornbread
always
went with a lot of stuff in my house.
And then so
Jiffy mix too.
corn,
like it was Jiffy.
Jiffy. So for some reason, my mom, somehow my mom got on like, she didn't want animal fat and stuff, and Jiffy always had like animal shortening in it. But at my grandmother's house, I always had Jiffy.
Yeah.
But my grandfather used to make hot water cornbread, which was not sweet. And hot water cornbread is where you just basically take the cornmeal. He would either mix bacon fat, because we used to always have a little tin can of fat or grease on the stove.
Yep. Which I still do to this day.
Mix that, but fry it in there. So it's just like hot water cornbread, just hot water and cornmeal, and you just mash it. And he would make like little balls, but they were kind of like oblong.
Oh, wow. Almost like a hush puppy or something.
Almost like a hush puppy. Not sweet at all, but it still would have like a good texture. And we would eat that mainly as complimentary things to like anything like soul food related, like collard greens and fried fish and sweet potatoes and things like that. But my mother, cornbread, she would put corn pieces sometimes. Like take the cornbread, get a can of corn.
What about cream corn? Did you ever put that in there? Because
Cream
sometimes that
corn.
would be.
Yeah, that would
That's like what I do now.
That's hits, and that's also like you swing it too far and you have corn pudding, which I also love.
I love that. No, I love that.
Yeah.
You put 2 cans in, you've got corn pudding, because
You
it
got
doesn't
corn
ever
pudding.
quite get kind of solid.
I would eat corn pudding like nobody's business. Actually, I might make some of that sometime soon. I haven't had that in a while.
Get so high. I had like a smoothie on the way over. I mean, come on.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
now we're talking about cornbread.
Now we're talking about cornbread. We're gonna have to make a full meal when we leave here. But yeah, those things were very like, I say those were the mom quick fast meals.
Yes.
Like my mom was
very similar in my house.
Casseroles, crock pots, all of that stuff. And then when you swing to like my mother would make a box cake. My grandmother would never. You know what I mean? Like it was like and you would just see the pendulum swinging on like working women and still trying to get it done. And then grandma is like, no, we're going to do it the old way.
And she's efficient. Like she's very efficient.
Very efficient.
So she can do it the old way.
Yeah.
I mean, if your grandmother's anything like mine, which I think she is.
Yeah.
Or was, she's not with us anymore. Mine too. But she's very efficient. She can do something from scratch and
do it the new way.
And she has a tiny kitchen and one little sink and no dishwasher, and she can keep up with all of that. And it's magic in her kitchen.
Imagine not having a dishwasher. I remember the days
for all those Thanksgivings and people.
We didn't have a dishwasher.
Yeah.
We didn't have a dishwasher. But yeah, so cakes. Your grandmother made cakes, right?
Bundt cake. She would make a bundt cake.
Oh, my grandmother was
heavy,
a bundt cake girl.
Big, just like lemon glaze.
Bundt cakes and pound cakes were my grandma's jam. She would make them for church. Like she was like the lady at church that would make all the cakes. So like the pastor would get a cake and people of the congregation, like she would she was making so many cakes, she would freeze them. Like she would have a day where she would make cakes and they were just in the freezer. And so when anybody asked for a cake, she was just like, yep, I got it. It's already there. And
that's awesome. Okay, yeah, she's efficient.
She was pretty efficient, but that was my first understanding of scratch, things from scratch, and different understandings of flour, AP flour.
Oh, so I don't know if my grandmother went that far.
Flour,
but yeah,
like sifted cake flour.
Cake flour,
bread flours. Like I didn't I thought flour was flour at the time, but I didn't realize how many variations of flour there was and what you needed to get done with different flours and the yields and things like that. So, and I like baking casually.
Same.
Yeah. You'll never catch me running a bakery though.
Oh, hell no. No. I've worked in bakeries and
yeah, you'll never catch me running a bakery.
I mean, I have lots of respect for that because I understand.
Me too. Yeah. I have great respect for pastry chefs and bakers. Dan the baker, our favorite baker, favorite community baker.
One of our favorite humans.
Humans in life, yes, is Dan the baker. But yeah, so I would say those early food memories of understanding why things may taste different from my mom's house to my grandmother's
I like this
house.
distinction because I hadn't really thought about it, but it's really true. And then both my grandmothers were very different from each other. And so Enid, my one grandma, my dad's mother, was an art teacher, an English teacher, and like an artist. And she was a wild human being. Yeah. She was awesome. She wore muumuus, but like beautiful, kind of glamorous. Like, I mean, I wouldn't call her a glamorous person. She was inventive. She was imaginative. She was just bold. Yeah. And she really didn't cook. Enid didn't really cook. She liked flavor. And so she and her husband, Jim, had 10 acres of forest land, which was attached to like a very large original growth forest in the middle of Illinois. And out there, it was like their retreat. It was about half an hour from town. Now it's all been developed. But there was like, but out there we would have like wherever the sun would shine through the trees, we would have a garden. So we had like just flower gardens, like the gladiolas. I was telling you about that. Yeah. But we also had all sorts of fruits and vegetables. And we did a lot of hunting for foraging for various things. But we had our honeybees. Every year we would get maple from our trees, sap from our trees, and then boil it down into maple, which we had all year. So for me, so she would be good, or my grandfather would be really good at making like pancakes, and they would do that from scratch with wheat. I mean, they were very much like a natural, live off the land kind of. They love that kind of thing. And but those pancakes, in fact, we make an ice cream that's like that, and it was made from my memory of these pancakes, which I had every time. Soaked. Yeah. And it has that like, real maple has that weird just kick in the back. It's like, it's not tart, but it has that like something. And so it's just like, it just kicks you. And it's so potent.
Is this the grandmother with the brambleberry?
Yeah. So we would collect brambleberries, which that was what she called anything with any berry that grew on a thorny vine. Yeah. And then we would freeze them. And when we had enough of them, we would make brambleberry crisp.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Awesome. I mean, it's so good. And then serve it with vanilla ice cream. So then that became, of course, a flavor. But then my other grandmother, Betty, she was the cook. I mean, she was stay at home. Yeah. I mean, she did have jobs in her life, but my grandfather was the breadwinner, and she raised 3 daughters, and she would cook 3 meals a day. And so it would be like, some kind of soup and sandwich at lunch and some kind of always a beautiful breakfast. But I mean, sometimes it was cereal, but we would have like a half of a grapefruit. I mean, they had a tiny little house, but she kept it so beautiful. Yeah. And her yard, she was really proud of. And it was the same with her food. So, I mean, everything was always laid out in this really elegant way. I thought it was elegant. And, our little egg cup with vitamins. Whenever we were at her house, we felt so cared for. Yeah. Because she was trained. She had time to do it at the time that she was the grandmother.
And I think that's key. My grandmother was very much the same. My grandmother's name was Geraldine. No middle name, just Geraldine. Yeah. And Geraldine was a large woman. She was tall. She was like 6 foot. And she was like, she was just a sizable lady. She was not a small, dainty lady. But the energy that she exuded and the care was very like dainty and soft and like... She also had time. My grandfather owned a construction company, and she was, just between like just things at the church and home and raising children. And later on, my grandmother also raised grandchildren in her home. She was definitely always the one that was just like, no, they can come stay over here. She was that
was
house.
Mine too. I was over there all the time.
Yeah. And not very big house, but like the memories that I have in there, like her whole backyard, one side of the yard was just vegetables. Yeah. It was collard greens.
Both of my grandparents had lots of gardens. It's true.
And celery. Like just all the things that, like needed to be there.
And they learned how to do that in the 40s. I mean, they learned how to do that. Well, in the 30s, probably.
Yeah, for sure. In the 30s, for sure.
You know, they were all struggling then. But in the 40s, too, growing those victory gardens, I mean, they really, really understood that. My grandmothers, both of them had stories about that.
And I definitely think that, like, that's sometimes lost on us.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like not like that skill set, you know, going outside just to get the things that you need for
like carrying,
for dinner.
Like surviving.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Lost on
is
us.
lost on us in many ways. And like when you learn these kinds of skills, it is so freeing. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it is very freeing. I think that the one thing that I most definitely learned from my grandmother is hospitality in food. Because you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. I'm missing the word.
Disconnect.
You can't disconnect those two things: hospitality and hosting.
Even at your own home with your own family and your own
because it comes from a place of caring.
It does. It does. Just like you said, breakfast. Breakfast. My grandmother definitely was a breakfast, lunch, and dinner gal. She made sure, you know, everyone ate. There was always scrambled eggs. There was always bacon. I'm talking about old school good bacon with the fat back on it, or the like, you know, with the rind on it. I mean, I remember going around as a kid, like chewing the gristle, you know, just from the fat back from the bacon.
Wait, so how did your grandmother do bacon? Because mine did it like in the oven, but like on like it was always perfect.
Perfect. In the broiler? She put it in the broiler?
Not in the broiler, but like in the oven. On the sheets, in its own fat.
Yeah.
And it was always perfect.
Yeah. My grandmother later, I'm pretty sure she started, when she was making a lot of bacon for like a whole crew of us, the grandkids, I just remember that cast iron skillet never leaving the stove.
Yeah, my grandmother had her grandmother's cast iron skillet. So it had a wooden handle that was falling off, but it was like very old, even a long time ago.
And you keep it greased. Keep the cast iron skillet greased. As soon as you're done, you add the grease in there just to coat it and let it sit. For it. And care for it. But I think that I remember, we had breakfast and then lunch, but dinner was like the, you know, a piece de resistance. Because she would, when we have Sunday dinners, traditionally every Sunday we have a Sunday dinner. Like every Sunday, my grandparents would leave church, and my grandmother would rush home, and she had a position in church they call them the deaconess. Basically, they're like deacons, but they're ladies, not the men. You know what I mean? And she was also a church nurse, so she, like, if somebody passed out or somebody had something, my grandmother, she was always dressed in all white. So she would come home dressed in her all white, but she would put a floor-length apron on. You know what I mean? Like the apron that would go all the way down with the back out. And she would proceed to make Sunday dinner. But I remember her telling us how to set the table. Like the grandkids were responsible for setting the table, or, you know, the kids or whatever. And she had the largest buffet of like beautiful china and like gold silverware, and everything felt like luxy. You know what I mean? I didn't know how much
it doesn't
any
matter,
of this
like,
shit cost, but I was like, wow.
And that doesn't even matter in a way. It's like, because I mean, even my grandmother she had a kitchen with one little table inside in this tiny kitchen where we all sat. Yeah. And we all crowded around. But she cared so much for it that I felt like, you know, I felt like the richest people in the world. Same. But it was like the tiniest, most humble place.
And it felt, I'm like, again, like we said, it felt cared for. The energy was right. Yeah. And
this is where we get it. This is what we take into the world as we go into our lives, as chefs and in people, you know, in food. I think that's exactly where we get it from, and that's what we're sort of transferring to the world when we make food. Yeah,
it is. It's an energy transfer, and you could tell when you're eating something from someone that had the love and the energy in them as they push that food out, versus someone who just threw it together.
You can absolutely tell. It is a very different experience. I mean, very much you can. When somebody really loves what they're doing, that's true of really any art or any kind of product that somebody's producing. But I mean, I really, you can feel it, and you can taste it.
And you can taste it. Do you remember your first memory of a food item that you were like, I'm never going to eat that again? that you were like, this is gross. I don't
Rabbit.
like it. Rabbit? Okay.
I was like, it's too close to cat. I just can't do it.
I feel that. I get it. My
like
grandparents
too close.
hunted, so we had rabbit, we had deer,
Deer I was fine with,
possum.
but like rabbit.
We've had all kinds of things, and
Possum, okay.
Yeah. It was. I mean, my family is from the deep south, so and then they migrated north to Ohio, and so like, you ate. I mean, I hear stories of my grandfather eating raccoon, possum, like it's everything that you could possibly think of that was available.
Yeah,
they ate. But rabbit is an interesting one because I think that rabbit. Currently in my adult life, I can eat rabbit, but then I think the association of a bunny, and also like you said, a cat, like the furry things and cute things. And I didn't understand the gamey taste of rabbit or deer. Because deer, we would always have, I thought it was beef stew, but it was really venison. And they would fry rabbit legs, frog legs, like all of those things. It threw me off that I thought these things were just too exotic for my palate.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, like not that long ago, probably 10 years now, I was in Sicily, maybe even more than that now. I was in Sicily. I was by myself in Sicily, and I was going there to meet with this olive oil producer. And it was such a wild, weird, magical experience. I mean, the whole trip was very strange. There were a lot of weird things that happened on this trip. But I was staying in this place. It was like the only place available, actually, in this area where I was staying. And it happened to be this incredibly posh like hotel that was made from a guy who was from the region, but he like had gone to Venice. The story was he went to Venice and made all his money, and he created this winery on this place. But it was really the only place to stay, and I had booked a couple of rooms there. I was the only guest in this hotel because it was not in the peak season. And there were two chefs there, I mean, with like tall hats, floor-length aprons, and they were basically just there for me. And they were like, what would you like for breakfast? I'm like, it doesn't matter, like just something little. I mean, I would go out for breakfast and it was like the entire room had the entire buffet set up or whatever of like beautiful foods. But every night I would come back from the olive oil production facility and the orchards. And what I had done that day, we were near Modica, which is the most incredible city if you ever get a chance to go. And it's like ancient and just like wild. But anyway, I would go back and I would have dinner in this place, and he was like, well, what do you like? What can I make you? I was like, literally anything. And, so the first night was like 5 courses. I'm like, okay, we don't have to be 5 courses.
That's a lot. Yeah.
So then the next night it was like, fewer courses. And then by the last night, he was like, God, and he has a very heavy accent, barely speak English. But he was like, you're my kind of guest because you eat anything. And it was true, and I was eating the most gorgeous things, uni, like soups, and like, I mean, he was making these, I was the only one there. And so the last night he came out with like his favorite dish, and he presented it to me, and he was like, baby horse. And I was like, huh? What's that? Baby horse. It was baby horse. And I was like, in this position where I couldn't be like,
That's
now
tough.
This might not be in my like this is the first one I'm going to send back. But at that point I was the 3rd night in. I had eaten everything else he'd given me, and he had been so sweet and wonderful. There was no way I was not going to eat it, so I ate it.
You ate it.
Of course I ate it, and it was fucking delicious.
Baby horse.
And it was it tasted, I'll tell you, it tasted like prime rib. So I asked him, what is what is the deal with horse? I cannot imagine using a baby horse to do this, and that it really bothered me. But he said, well, in Sicily, they used to eat the old horses. Okay, well, that makes sense. But like to take it to this like gourmet level,
with the baby.
I kind of think that's what they were doing with the baby horse. And I'm like, I can't do this.
That can get a little tricky. I mean, I was in Malta, and their national dish is rabbit. And so like, I was just like inundated with rabbit. But I will tell you, similar experience. I was in Japan, and a good friend of ours treated us to this beautiful sushi experience, like a 4-seater, like sushi experience. I mean, gorgeous. And I felt like, as a chef, I was embarrassed because I was like, I'm not going to eat all of this stuff, because it was like, so you said whale, huh? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a moment where I looked at my partner. Also texturally, I ate mostly everything, let's be clear. But texturally, there are certain things that, like, even if they taste good, I just can't chew them.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of sushi, it's like too big for my mouth, or I feel like I'm gonna,
so there was definitely some
yeah.
experiences. Like I had not had raw like abalone.
Yep.
And that texturally was
It
a
is.
little bit interesting for me. I still feel like gooey duck and things like that
Yeah.
are texturally like
Same.
tough for me. The whale, they actually smoked it into a bacon.
Okay.
All right, maybe.
But then you're watching the sea shepherd out there, like trying to like prevent whale hunting or whatever. You're like, okay, well, I'm here.
And then my mother
what can you
loves
do?
whales, would like swim with
Yes.
whales any day. And I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I can never tell her I ate this. But there's also just, and again, this is our American palate.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we have
these
no.
are things that we were taught that like,
Yeah.
no, you don't eat these things. But like in other countries, they eat horses, they
Totally.
eat camel, they eat
Absolutely.
all kinds of things like that. Like my favorite place to go to explore these things is Jungle Gyms. in
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh, Jungle Gyms.
Cincinnati.
He bought the tram from Disney.
Yeah, I did know
he
that.
has a tram.
He does have a
I
tram.
think it's so funny to me.
But
He's
Jungle
the
Gyms has
character
all the meats.
in the best way. Yeah, he does.
They have all of the things. When I was in high school, I had a foreign exchange student from Australia, and she is half Aborigine, so she's from the Northern Territory of Australia. And when she came, she needed to have some other proteins that were outside of what we normally eat. Like Americans are basically chicken,
Yep.
beef, pork, fish. That's it.
Eggs.
And eggs. That's it. And so she's like, no, I want kangaroo. I want shark. I want, like, she went through the whole list of things that she typically eats. And I'm like,
Where?
wow. So we had to Jungle Gyms.
Yeah.
And she's able to pick all the things. And she likes her stuff super rare. And so I was getting a life lesson.
Where they
as a
have kangaroo
teenager.
at Jungle Gyms.
They do.
That's
I
great.
made kangaroo
Okay.
burgers a few times.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't mind kangaroo actually.
Yeah.
It just, you just have to wrap your head around the cuteness. And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
I think also as Americans we disassociate from the process.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the animal is. We
Doesn't
don't really
matter
think of
what
it as
the
an
animal
animal.
is. We just
Yeah.
disassociate from the process, and we think steak comes out looking like steak.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
so things like that. But yeah, I would those. Now you said rabbit, and I was going to say the most random thing.
Yeah, yeah. What's yours?
Mine was asparagus.
Asparagus. Oh my God.
I'm gonna tell you why though.
But white asparagus too, or green? Both.
It didn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
Asparagus and Brussels sprouts and lima beans.
Oh,
But
I
asparagus
love those.
primarily, we were not made, like my mother would get asparagus out of a jar
Oh
or a
yeah, those are
can.
disgusting.
And that was my
I
first
cannot imagine
introduction.
it. I've never even had that, but I've seen it.
Oh, I've had it. I've had it. And I was like, how in the hell
Is
am I
anybody
supposed
supposed
to
to
eat this? It looks like coated with snot.
Yeah, yeah,
It looks
yes,
like it's
yes.
like-
I'm
it
not.
was
I'm not here
just
for that. It's gross. And it
gooey,
smells bad.
And it smells bad. And I remember how I had to like redevelop relationships with food. I think also between the 90s, not the 90s, I'm an 80s kid, but like it was just a lot of canned vegetables. It was a lot of frozen and canned things.
We did
And-
not have many canned vegetables. We had a lot of fresh, but and not
Yeah.
cooked, just
Yeah.
like fresh, raw. Except lima beans and like peas. Peas and lima beans I love straight from the can.
Oh, go to hell with those. like go straight to hell
yeah.
with lima
I love to get
beans.
as many lima beans on the fork as I can.
No,
The baby lima
no.
beans. No, again, my mother would put
You could
like
torture me with
way
lima
too much
beans.
butter in there. I mean, so it was like butter and
Yeah.
lima beans.
Yeah,
and it
I
was
mean,
good.
lima beans were like a standard thing. Like it was just lima beans, butter, salt, pepper.
Yeah, exactly.
And like when that was put on my plate, I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Or the
So
mixed
funny.
vegetables with the lima beans.
Yeah, no,
and
I
those
didn't like that.
short little pieces
Because
of
the lima beans weren't
carrots and
done enough
green
in
beans.
those, I felt like.
don't
Anyway,
know.
I never liked that either.
Let's talk about where we are right now with our food journey, and let's talk about just briefly how we get into the spaces now and make things that undoubtedly people are just like, yeah, that's the one. You know what I mean? Or how do you connect with that now?
Yeah, because making food for people, and it's the same with ice cream, but I mean, with any food, and I make,
Yeah.
I love to cook, and I love to cook. In fact, I actually prefer cooking a lot of times than going out, these days, because, you get hungry for something and then you're just like making that. But I like cooking for people. And I think there is like I think there is I want to say a magic to it. And of course, magic is so many things, but it's a feeling, and it is like what you're putting into it and what you're, it's the love that you're putting into it, but it's an understanding.
It's an
It's an understanding that you have with the ingredients and what you're trying to make, and then also the people that you're serving. Mm-hmm. And it is like this flow of energy, mm-hmm. I feel like. And when it's all like aligned, it's a really beautiful thing. It's a very sensual thing, this idea of food. I mean, you're feeding people. It's going into people's bodies, into their mouths, into their bodies. It's literally becoming them.
It is becoming.
And you're thinking about, of course, how it tastes and, the seasoning, whether it's, balanced or whatever, but then also those textures and temperature and texture and the body of, various kinds of things too. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really beautiful to be a woman. I mean, I have been the one that mostly nourished my kids with food, my family with food, mm-hmm. as most women are, and to be also a person who works, whose job it is to work in food. And this is like one of the reasons that I struggle even to sometimes make Instagram videos, because it's like I can spend my entire time in food, which I think is so absolutely beautiful and a beautiful thing to do and a beautiful endeavor. But also it's like it can really take over your entire life.
It can. I mean,
in a beautiful way too.
In a beautiful way. Mm-hmm. I do so many beautiful things that have never been captured. Yeah. And they're just in my internal memory. But I think that when you have like an unspoken contract or an agreement with food. Mm-hmm. And I know that like when I speak life into menus that I'm writing and I'm brainstorming how to connect with food, I can taste these flavors in my mouth without making them.
Same. I mean, this is with ice cream as well. I mean, you have this memory bank. You understand what it is, and you can write recipes without testing them anymore.
Exactly.
Which sounds crazy, but you really can do that when you've done this for so long.
You can. Mm-hmm. I know that. Like I could just close my eyes
and mix things together.
And I'm like, oh, you know what? That shit's gonna taste real good when I get to it.
Does.
And it always does. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I have had very little like fails on the flavors. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's an agreement that I have with food, the ingredients. It speaks to my internal core. It's like I have a whisper of like, use sage, use this.
What is something that you make? So I have a notes program, like folder where I perfect recipes. So I have recipes that I've perfected over years. This is the stuff I make at home, not ice cream, because that's a whole other thing too. We have that obviously as well. But what is something that would be in that folder for you? Like, what are the things that you make at home that are kind of like your go-to that you can always make? You don't really need a recipe, but you can always consult your recipe and maybe you're tweaking it. That are like that you'd be like
interesting.
Proud of.
That I would be proud of. I don't know. I think everything that I make, I feel like is pretty solid. For years, I'm going to tell you this. This sounds crazy.
That's actually true.
It sounds crazy that like I am just now in the last like recent years really writing down things.
Yeah, because now I'm thinking like I'm giving this to Greta. I mean, my daughter is on this program, so it really is to transfer them to her. Mm-hmm. And I think one day I'll open it up, or I'll keep putting them on my Substack or whatever. I just put my pizza one on there last night. But so that's
I do. I'm just now
motivation.
Getting used to. I feel like my memory has been pretty solid, and I just shoot from the hip most of the time. And then if something works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll just switch it up the next time. I have been working on, because my strong suit is not in like pastry, so I've been really doing some of my grandmother's recipes. Like a coconut cake is like my favorite.
Oh,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Coconut cake.
We got to make coconut cakes together.
We
should make your grandmother's recipe. We should make my recipe.
We should
have a coconut cake extravaganza.
Coconut cake off.
Is it.
And that's the only thing my grandmother and I, that was a shared passion between us both, because there's not a lot of people that just love coconut in my family. They're but my grandmother would make this cake.
People either love it or hate it. But
they love it or hate it. Mm-hmm. And we would either have like, I would either have like a little coffee or like a little, like I was drinking caffeine way too young.
With my grandmother. Same. Yeah.
Drinking Coca-Cola and coffee like way too young. But But those are the things that, as I'm doing a book, writing a memoir, and a recipe book right now, and a lot of it is resting in that core memory. So I'm running back a lot of old family recipes and just retrying them. Most of the stuff I just remembered watching.
Yeah.
And I just knew how it tasted.
And you know how it tastes and you know how it feels. So when
I
it's
built
right,
from the
you know
taste
it.
back.
Yes,
you know what I
totally.
mean? Like I know what it tastes like. So I'm just like doing this thing. And I think also as a chef, we move so fast. A lot of times.
And it's a different way of cooking. When you cook at home, it's a different way of cooking
It's a different
than
way
when
of
you cook for
cooking.
people.
For the longest, to be honest with you, I slacked off at cooking at home for
same.
a while when I was really when I'm really in the heat of like work. I don't even want to cook when I get home because I cook
and
for
then
work.
People don't appreciate it the same way at home.
Don't.
It's like they don't give a shit. And you're like, well,
I'm looking at my kids like, you know how much time I just put into this shit?
Yeah,
And you're
exactly.
just like,
I went to
nah.
the store, I bought all this stuff, I processed it, I made it, I
No,
washed
they really
like,
want
all this
spaghetti.
stuff.
They
Exactly.
really want spaghetti.
So I went through that as well. It just became very boring. And now we're back in because my kids are a little older and they'll do it. They'll eat. And Greta really loves that. She loves cooking too or whatever. But my recipes that are my like sort of go-to where I feel like I'm known for, I've made them a lot. If I have to go to a party, like I know it's like my thing is like, I mean, my banana bread, that's the thing. The coconut cake now is like, that's the thing. Ratatouille, that's another one that I can do. Now, I don't use eggplant in my ratatouille, which makes it maybe even not ratatouille. It's like a vegetable stew or something. But it has that like, it hits. Like it's so good. I put a little bit of lavender in it. You wouldn't know that when you're tasting it, but it does give it this like beautiful flavor. And then I serve it over polenta a lot of times with poached egg. This actually recipe started because I was reading about Sarah Sherman, who was from Cincinnati, like in the 1920s, and she inherited some money from her family. They were very wealthy, but she didn't get enough, so she went to France, south of France. But she was like, she had this like little place, or I mean, it was kind of big, this on the French Riviera, where all of the like Hemingway and Cole Porter and
so she was
all
vibes.
these people, like so Picasso even would come by, like. Everybody, the Fitzgeralds were there, like so they would always go there. So she had this beautiful garden, and
can you imagine just saying Picasso just stopped by?
They're just here for the week or whatever. You know?
It's my boy.
It was incredible. So they, so she would make something like this. She would make ratatouille with polenta and a poached egg, and so I started using my ratatouille like that.
Yeah.
For parties because it's like the simplest thing, and then
simple.
you don't have to be working.
Yeah.
You know, it's absolutely beautiful. It's a perfect summer thing. You can freeze it, and then I like the next day I'll roll it into like the really thin, barely cooked omelet. It's really delicious.
Tasty.
Yeah, that's like something that's like a core recipe of mine.
I think that I know we should talk about inviting guests and inviting people to chime in and tell us about their food memories.
I want to hear these food memories. I love it so much. It's just fun to think about.
Whether
it's
you
fun
love it
to
or hate
read
it.
from other people. Yeah. Even like stuff that like you can't. You either ate too much, somebody forced it on you. That's one thing I never do is force my kids to eat anything. I don't have any food. You know,
I was
forcing.
I was forced to eat things.
I would never do that to my
But
children.
I was forced to be in the clean plater club. Like that was a lot of drama back in the day with my cousins and siblings. It's like who's a clean plater, and then you get up from the table first, and it's like I'm scooping things into a napkin in my lap. I one time put it in my panties. Like I just like scooped food into my panties, and I went upstairs and dropped a bunch of Brussels sprouts in the toilet, and they were still floating. And my mom was like, this has got to be you. And I was like, well, yeah.
I mean, the one time I was forced to eat something, it was at my grandmother's, and she had made grilled cheese, but put mayonnaise inside of it. So then it was like hot mayo.
Ooh.
To this day, like
you can't fuck with it. But on the outside, a good grilled cheese sandwich, if you do the outside with mayo, perfection.
But when it's like a squirt of hot mayo, is just. Especially when you're a kid. I mean, it took me a long time to like learn to love mayo, but no, that's not gonna.
It's not the move unless you're mixing it up in a casserole. That is not the move. So,
but I want to know these from people. Like, I want to know what are the beautiful food memories, the traumatic food memories.
Yeah, I would like to know those things.
What are your recipes that you go to that you believe you've perfected, that you are known for? And
I would like to hear
you and
those.
I should start doing some at some point I can see this kind of developing into, I don't think we're not going to talk about food every episode, but I can see us doing some episodes in the kitchen and actually sharing some of these recipes that we've got and some cooking. Because every time you come over and cook at my house, it's like, I mean, as long as I'm not going into anaphylactic shock because of ginger, which happened once.
I put too much ginger one time.
Oh my God, so delicious.
You know I love Asian, everything, all Asian, so I'm heavy on the ginger.
But I loved it so much I ate a lot of it, and then But like, this would be it'd be a fun project to start to do, like, every once in a while, just get in the kitchen and cook something and share some of that. I think so.
I think that would be dope. I think people would love to see that.
Maybe we take over a restaurant sometime and we have a little part. I can see this. Yeah, I can see the future. I can see the future happening here.
Listen,
we have some in-person gatherings with our.
Bright. It's so bright. So send us your food faux pas and your food loves. We would love to hear your stories. Mm-hmm. I know that in the future of this show, we're going to talk about some serious, like, fun, cool things, some edgy things. It's kind of go all over the place. The disruption on all levels. Yeah. It's not disruption doesn't have to be this huge thing. It could be a very small shift, but it makes a difference, you know? So the disruptors we'll have as our future guest.
Yep. Sometimes disruption happens.
Some great stories.
Right. Like in your everyday, the little sort of acts every day, and sometimes it's really big. And so, I'm excited to see where this goes. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're here to disrupt.
Yeah,
everything. We're even disrupting your core food memories. Let's talk about them.
Yes. All right, Nikki. It was awesome to be together again today.
Likewise.
Thanks, everybody.
For sure.